So let's look at nutrient deficiencies. Most Western diets are deficient in vitamins and minerals. Factory farming practices have depleted the soil, and like I told you earlier, about 80% of the soil that's arable in the U.S. is actually sterile. It's really sad because of all the zillions of tons of herbicides and things that have been poured on those soils. Vegetables and fruits are not rich in nutrients like they used to be. Many people have chronic nutrient deficiencies, and most of the time they don't even know it. Organs and tissues need enough nutrients in order to function properly, and deficiencies often cause imbalance and eventual breakdown. So here's some interesting things. Nutrient deficiency evaluation. The body knows what it needs. You can ask, do you have a nutritional deficiency? And if yes, you can find the nutrient on the nutrient list. Now, are you all familiar with the nutrient list that it looks like? Okay. And that's in your body code mind map as well. Okay. Most dietary nutrient deficiencies are correctable with supplementation. Sometimes a food can correct a deficiency if it's organic. Okay. The nutrient chart contains info about nutrients in food as well. So if you look at that nutrient chart, there's a whole bunch of additional information there now, but you have to scroll down to see it. Okay. The whole thing, I think, is about maybe 10 or 12 pages long now. So we go into depth about each one of those nutrients and what the actual recommended amounts are and so on, and toxicity, things like that. So long-term deficiencies may require more than the recommended daily allowance until the deficiency is corrected. It's possible to take too much of certain nutrients. Okay? Too much of anything can be bad, right? And again, consult the body code nutritional chart for RDA info. Now, RDA is the recommended daily adult requirement. Now, let me explain to you where that came from. Okay? They basically took a whole population of people, and some of them were quite ill and quite nutritionally deficient and so on. And so it doesn't really mean a whole lot, but at least it gives you some kind of a guideline. Okay? So it's a good idea to check. If you ever have any questions about recommending anything for anybody, get more information, okay? Or get some help. Again, recommend that your clients consult their doctor for questions or concerns. So let's talk about herbs. Nearly all herbs have healing or medicinal qualities, okay? But before suggesting an herb for a client, be aware of any potential problems that could result. Now, what I would recommend is that if you're going to recommend herbs for somebody, get yourself a really good herb book that lists the different potential problems that could arise. Some herbs, for example, can create problems for people if you give them in very high doses. So you want to be careful. If you're ever in doubt about this, just have them see an herbalist. Okay? All right? You always want to err on the side of caution. Sometimes the body needs to avoid a particular herb. So you can ask, is there a particular herb on the list that your body needs? And you've all seen the herb list, right? It's in the back of the body code manual. It's divided up like the nutrient chart and the food chart. It's divided up into columns and rows. So you find them just like you're finding a trapped emotion. Do you need an herb in column A or B, etc. So it's pretty easy to find. Okay? You can also ask, is there a particular herb on this list that you need to avoid? Okay? So you always want to remember that. When you're testing for nutrients or herbs, okay, or foods, you want to ask that question both ways. Because it may be that somebody needs to avoid something, and it may be that they don't need that thing. They need to stop using it. Okay? So keep that in mind. All right, you can identify the immediate dosage and the long-term dosage if required. A lot of the time, if somebody has some kind of a deficiency of something, they will need a higher dose of whatever it is in the short term. And you can test them and see what their dose might be in 4 days or 5 days or 6 days, and that dosage may drop down. Now, something else that's really interesting is that I noticed when I was in practice that I found this with calcium especially, but it can occur with other things as well. Sometimes I would find that a person would be deficient in calcium, for example, and they would say, well, I'm taking calcium every day. And I would think that's strange. And I would test them for the calcium that they were taking. And what the body basically told me was that the body will accept a particular supplement for a while, and it might test great for them, maybe for a few months. And then suddenly the body will just say, you know what? I don't want it from that source anymore. I want a different source of this, and I'm not going to accept that anymore, and that's it. Isn't that weird? But that's how the subconscious mind, that's how the body works. So don't be real surprised if that happens to you. And sometimes you might be taking the same calcium for 10 years, and guess what? Sometimes you might as well just be throwing it down the toilet because your body may not be accepting it even though you need it. Isn't that weird? But I'm just telling you what I find. I just work here. So. Make it clear to your client that these are only suggestions. When you're recommending or suggesting something for them, you can just say, look, here's what I'm finding. It's a suggestion for you. Okay, so kind of a fine line, a little bit different than actually prescribing. Okay, but be sure to kind of try to stay on that side of things. Yeah?
Long-term dosage, since you can only test into the future a little bit, or?
Well, it's usually pretty accurate if you're testing supplements like this. The body will usually give you fairly accurate, but it's always a good idea to go back and test again, a ways into the future and just see how accurate you were. But it's usually pretty good when you're testing these. Okay, so some herbs should be avoided during pregnancy. Okay, now the rule with pregnant women is you don't want to ever give them what? Anything, right? So if the baby's born and has 2 heads, they're going to blame you, Gary, right? Yeah, or whoever. So you want to be careful of that. Well, sometimes the body may need food for healing and balance. Hippocrates said, let your foods be your medicine. Okay. Oh, it was Rutgers University. Yes. Organically grown produce contained hundreds to thousands of times more minerals than commercially grown. Grow your own produce if possible. Get a little greenhouse maybe if you need to. That's a great way to do it. You can ask, is there a particular food on this page that you would benefit from, or is there a particular thing on this list that would help you to heal? Okay. If yes, just use your process of elimination to identify the column, row, cell, and finally the food. Now, there is a group of conditions related to poor quality or lack of nutrient intake, absorption, or utilization, and we call that physical malnutrition. Okay? There are 2 major types. Protein energy malnutrition results from deficiencies in any or all nutrients. Okay? And so this is the kind of malnutrition that you see with kids that are starving in very poor countries. Right? They're just not getting any of the stuff that they need. Now, micronutrient deficiency results from micronutrient deficiencies such as vitamins, minerals, etc. And that's the type of deficiency that we see here. We're getting plenty to eat. We're getting lots of protein and lots of carbs and lots of fat. Yeah, lots of junk too. But we're often deficient in certain things. Okay? Now, there's also spiritual malnutrition. You ever heard of that? Yeah. Raise your hand if you ever heard of that. Me neither. But we are beings with both a spirit and a physical body. And it's possible for the spirit to become malnourished. Now, your body will send strong messages about physical malnutrition. Well, you've got to eat 3 times a day or you get hungry. Okay? And if you try going a day or 2 without food, your body really lets you know, hey, I need food. However, spiritually, it's different because the spirit does not send you strong messages about its malnourishment. It just doesn't. It's a different thing. But it's vitally important to feed our spirits on a regular basis. Now, our testing shows that worldwide, roughly, listen to this, okay? Because the reality is you can look at a person that might look really well-fed physically, and they might be big and husky, but if you could actually see their spirit, they might look like a starving person from the desert of wherever. Do you know what I mean? They might look really emaciated, spiritually speaking. You with me? Yes. All right. 53% of people in this world are in a state of complete spiritual starvation. I mean, they are literally dying of spiritual starvation. Isn't that interesting? You can test this yourself and see what you come up with, but this is what we have found. 32% of people on this planet are in a state of spiritual malnourishment. So they're not getting enough spiritual food. They might be getting plenty of physical food, but they are in a state of spiritual malnourishment. The remaining 15% of people on the planet are actually getting enough spiritual food, and high vibration is what I'm talking about. They're getting enough high vibrational spiritual energy food that they're considered spiritually well nourished. What do you think about that? Raise your hand if you think that's kind of interesting. Okay, I think so, yeah. So it's all about vibration. We need to edify our spirits. Now that word edify means to rise to a higher level of feeling, okay? Have you ever been to a movie, for example, that you walk out of and you just feel good? You feel really good. You just feel like you're elevated, like you're walking on air maybe, and you feel love, you feel happiness, right? That feeling comes when we're edifying ourselves. And that word edify, you can look it up. It's kind of an old English word, but I like that word. Everything that comes from up above has that sort of action or effect on us. It edifies us. It makes us feel good. It makes us feel more love and more happiness, right? And a higher vibration, okay? Anything that raises our vibration, enjoying nature, okay? Peaceful music. You want to nourish your relationship with your higher power, prayer, meditation, scripture reading, acts of service to other people. When you serve somebody else and you really help them, how does that make you feel? Doesn't that make you feel better? Makes you feel like you're on a little higher level than you were, right? That's good. That's spiritual food. That's feeding your spirit. You can ask the body what type of food that spirit needs, okay? And you can help address somebody's spiritual malnutrition. Because if somebody comes to you, okay, and maybe they've got some kind of physical issue going on, but maybe a bigger problem for them is that they are spiritually in a state of starvation. Every other person statistically that you see, okay, is going to be spiritually starving to death. So, just food for thought, okay? Keep that in mind.